welcome to Now Daily. I'm Robert Crawford. Here's what's happening now. We're talking about the cashless society. It really all stemmed from me coming across this article by USA Today by Glenn Reynolds saying cash is the currency of freedom. And it really opened my eyes, and I've been tracking this fairly closely for the last probably the last 5 to 10 years. I don't know, probably last 5 years I really paid attention to it, on this big push to get rid of cash, right? Why are they pushing everything to be digital? They have, Apple Pay, Google Pay. They are putting bets on it. When I say they, you're probably saying, who is they? The elites, the globalists that are trying to push the world in the direction they want. And they want to get rid of cash for one very specific reason. They're going to say a whole bunch of other reasons why they're doing it. This article specifically talks about how the whole idea was to stop terrorism or theft by getting rid of the $100 bill. Well, they want a cashless system so they can fully control it. Not just that, but since at the end of the day they own the banks, they want the cashless system because then they can control every transaction and they get a piece. When you swipe your debit card at the grocery store, maybe you have an EBT card that's just a debit card. When you swipe that, the merchant gets paid. When you have a credit card that has 1%, 2%, 3% cash back, who's paying that? It's not the bank paying it. They're actually charging that merchant for that transaction. If you don't know how credit card processing works, just a brief overview. They're charging a few percentage points and usually a flat fee per transaction to the owner, to the business. And that is a piece that's going straight to the bank. So they want every transaction to go through that so they can profit and so they can control us. They know if someone gets out of a line, if they can just label them with the NDAA orders and bills that have been passed. They can label them a terrorist, a domestic terrorist, and they could turn off his debit cards. And if they can really push this cashless society to the point where businesses aren't even required or are actually banned from accepting cash, that's really all that needs to happen, right? I mean, I'm mainly paying off debit cards. I like it because of the ease of use. We're going to voluntarily do this payment system. And the cashless payment system could work, but not under a fiat currency system where they control the central bank. It could work on a system like, I thought this was pretty cool. It's called BitGold. Something like BitGold is a real alternative to the dollar. I'm totally cool with using BitGold and then swiping it, but the problem is that's still on the dollar system. It's still going with the price of gold compared to the dollar because businesses can only accept dollars because that's what the federal government requires right now. But you can see everyone's talking about this cashless society, cashless, CNBC. More firms adopt Apple Pay. Apple Pay is pushing. They want your payment in your pocket. They want control of your cash. Did you know that when you deposit your cash into, let's say, Bank of America, that it's technically the bank's money? They open an account for you. They type some numbers in a computer, but it's not your money anymore. It's the bank's. You can access it to a point. But we see what happens in Argentina and Greece and all these other countries. Over time, if the banks get into trouble, it almost happened in 2008, then they just printed more. So this cashless society, to me, is the biggest concern we have right now because everything's so based off money. You have to understand that they got rid of the gold standard first and gave us the currency. And now the technology has enabled them to get rid of the printing of the currency and literally just type some numbers into a computer. Hit one button and your entire life savings is gone. So how can we counteract something like this? We have to push to get rid of this system. We have to get rid of the Federal Reserve and back the dollar to something that everyone has a part of, that can't be controlled by an entity or person. I think that's what we really need to do. But some of these are really, Cashless Society right here by Bloomberg. Governments and their taxpayers' potential advantages abound. Issuing digital currency would be cheaper than printing bills and minting coins. Well, of course it would. It could improve statistical indicators such as inflation and gross domestic product. Traceable transactions could help inhibit terrorist financing, money laundering, fraud, tax evasion, and corruption. Look at each one of those words. Money laundering, tax evasion. We've been ingrained in our society right now to believe that those are criminal activities, that we need to tell the government every single cent that we spend and where we spend it. It wasn't like that until just the last few decades. Even before the 50s. The IRS wasn't even created until 1913 when the Federal Reserve was. Did you know that FDR in 1933 required every single person in the United States to turn in their gold bullion? You had to literally give it to the Federal Reserve, and they gave you a piece of paper instead. At least on there it said that you could redeem it at some point for the gold back. If you didn't, you would literally go to prison. You had to go into Bank of America, Wells Fargo, one of these major banks, and literally give them your gold, and they give you a piece of paper. That's less than 100 years ago. That's what you're. So just in the short amount of time, then in 71, Nixon takes us off the gold standard, right? So we got off the gold standard in 71, and now we literally have a piece of paper. The only reason we use these pieces of paper is because the government says that you can only pay taxes in these pieces of paper. And if you don't pay taxes, they're going to throw you in jail. I pay my taxes. I file every single year. But a lot of controversy on whether we actually have an income tax or not. There's a lot of controversy going around on if it was ever ratified. You need to watch Freedom to Fascism and look at what Aaron Russo laid out as the foundation, and then what Irwin Schiff has written about and why he was thrown in jail in Nevada for writing a book. And then you have to look at people like Joe Bannister and why they worked for the IRS and then came out after 2 years of studying to try to find the law where it required you to file a tax return. Couldn't find it. So he quit. They made him, when he brought it up to his superiors, they made him resign. And then they came after him criminally a few years later. And then he beat them in court. So pay attention to what's going on right now. I mean, do we really want to move to a cashless society? It could work if we have a solid foundation for that system. I like Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a self-contained system. I see online e-commerce stores accepting them now. I haven't used it for a transaction yet, but I like that it's very low friction. Friction meaning not much money is taken out as a percentage just to do the transaction. But we need to pay attention to the cashless society. We need to stop this at all costs unless we change the entire model of the dollar. We have to not allow this. They can't just control everything. This is going to give them full control. If they don't like what you're doing, you can't even buy food at this point. They've made it so our cities, society has now grown to this point where most people aren't farming. Only 2% of the population is farming. So 98% of us rely on grocery stores. I mean, if that stops for just 5 days, if trucks stop coming in for just 5 days delivering groceries, we're all in a big heap of trouble. So how do we stop stuff like this? It's about knowledge. You have to understand the history of how we got in here. We can go in way deeper in the history. I just told you a little bit about the dollar and why we need to be very concerned with the cashless society, because the same entities that set it up in 1913 are pushing for it now. The same group, the same people with the same ideology. So this has been Now Daily. Comment, subscribe below. Let me know if you find out anything interesting that we need to talk about. We're just searching for the truth.